December 7th, 1941. A Sunday morning that began like any other in the Hawaiian Islands. The first light crept across Oahu, touching the calm waters of Pearl Harbor, where the United States Pacific Fleet rested in quiet pride. Sailors prepared for breakfast, officers read their morning papers, and a band was rehearsing for the flag-raising ceremony. No one imagined that within moments, the calm would be shattered, and the world would be thrust into a storm of war. At 7:55 a.m., the sound of aircraft engines ripped through the sky. More than 350 Japanese planes appeared above the island, launched from 6 carriers far out in the Pacific. Within seconds, torpedoes sliced through the harbor waters, and bombs screamed down from the clouds. The battleship Arizona exploded in a single blinding flash, splitting in two and sinking within minutes. The Oklahoma rolled over after being struck by multiple torpedoes, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. Ships burned from bow to stern, and oil fires turned the sea into a black inferno. The attack was swift, ruthless, and total. By the time the last plane vanished at 9:45 a.m., Pearl Harbor was unrecognizable. 8 battleships were damaged or destroyed, nearly 200 aircraft were lost on the ground, and over 2,400 Americans lay dead. It was the most devastating foreign assault ever carried out on American soil. The harbor that once symbolized safety had become a graveyard, but in the ashes of that morning, a new force was born, one that would change the course of World War II and the fate of nations. For Japan, the plan had been bold. Years of rising tension had pushed it toward war. The empire's armies had conquered much of China and moved into Southeast Asia in search of resources and power. When the United States responded by cutting off Japan's oil supply, Japan's leaders saw only one path forward: seize what they needed by force and neutralize the one power capable of stopping them. The architect of this plan, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, knew the danger. He had studied in America and understood its vast industrial strength. "I fear," he warned, "that all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." He was right. News of the attack spread across the world within hours. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt received the first reports with disbelief and fury. Japan's ambassadors had still been discussing peace even as their aircraft struck Hawaii. The next day, Roosevelt addressed Congress in a speech that echoed through history. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. His words unified a divided nation. Isolation ended in an instant. Congress voted for war with only one dissenting vote, and America entered World War II with a determination unlike anything the world had ever seen. Factories that had been building cars and radios began producing tanks, planes, and ammunition. Millions of men enlisted. Women joined the workforce in record numbers, building the weapons and machines that would carry the Allies to victory. The sleeping giant had awakened, and its power began to roll across oceans and continents. Before Pearl Harbor, the war in Europe and Asia seemed to tilt in favor of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, and much of Asia had fallen under Japanese control. But America's entry transformed the conflict into a truly global war and shifted its momentum. U.S. industry supplied the Allies with food, weapons, and technology on an unprecedented scale. American soldiers and sailors joined forces with British and Soviet armies, turning defense into offense. In the Pacific, the United States moved quickly from shock to counterattack. Only 6 months after Pearl Harbor, American forces struck back at the Battle of Midway. Using intelligence and skill, They ambushed Japan's fleet and sank 4 of the same aircraft carriers that had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was a turning point. From that moment, Japan's expansion stopped, and the slow, brutal march toward Tokyo began. Island by island, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, American forces advanced across the Pacific at enormous cost, pushing Japan back toward its homeland. In Europe, the impact of America's entry was just as profound. Supplies poured into Britain and the Soviet Union. The Allied powers gained the strength to open new fronts. American troops landed in North Africa, then in Italy, and finally, on June 6, 1944, D-Day. They stormed the beaches of Normandy. The tide of war turned irrevocably. Hitler's armies, once unstoppable, began to crumble under the combined weight of Allied might. The war that had begun with a surprise attack in Hawaii would end nearly 4 years later with Japan's unconditional surrender. After Germany fell in May 1945, the world's attention turned back to the Pacific. Japan refused to give up, even as its cities burned under relentless bombing. Then, in August 1945, the United States unleashed a weapon that changed history, Baidio, the atomic bomb. Hiroshima was destroyed on August 6th, and Nagasaki 3 days later. The devastation was beyond imagination. Faced with annihilation, Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was over. The attack on Pearl Harbor had set in motion the events that led to that moment. It had brought America into the war, tipped the balance of power, and ultimately determined who would win. Without American involvement, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan might have dominated Europe and Asia for generations. Instead, the attack unified the Allies and unleashed an industrial and military effort that reshaped the world. The cost was unimaginable. More than 60 million lives lost worldwide. But from that destruction emerged a new order. The United States, once reluctant to join global affairs, became a world leader. The United Nations was born from the ashes of conflict, and the atomic age began, forever changing the meaning of power and peace. For the people who lived through December 7th, 1941, the memories never faded. Survivors remembered the smell of burning oil, the cries for help, the shock of seeing friends and ships vanish beneath the waves. The wreck of the USS Arizona still lies beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor, its sunken hull a tomb for more than 1,000 men. Drops of oil still rise to the surface, what many call the tears of the Arizona. It is a quiet reminder of the morning that changed everything. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, it believed it could cripple America long enough to secure its empire. Instead, it awakened a nation whose unity, determination, and resources would prove decisive. The attack meant to paralyze became the spark that ignited victory. The world that emerged after World War II was new, shaped by lessons born in fire. The United States and its allies rebuilt Europe and Japan, turning enemies into partners. Technology advanced at a pace never seen before, and the world entered an era defined by both hope and fear. Yet every December 7th, the story returns to that peaceful harbor in Hawaii, to the sound of distant engines and the moment when history turned. It is the story of how a single morning's violence reshaped the destiny of nations, how an empire's ambition led to its downfall, how the sleeping giant awoke and helped bring freedom to millions, and how, from the ashes of war, a new world rose, scarred but stronger, reminded that peace, once lost, must always be guarded.